I'm Catherine Bernheimer. It's my pleasure to be here with Marion Kreith, who moved to Boulder in 1959 with her husband Frank, who we've also just interviewed. And Marion has graciously agreed to talk to us about her experiences in Boulder. And the first question I'm going to ask is, in 1959, when you came here, tell us what you encountered and what your first experiences of Boulder and Jewish Boulder were.
When I came here in 1959, I was highly pregnant, and that's the only thing I think I was concerned with at the time. And I know that you were particularly interested in the Jewish experience, and very unfortunately, I was not very much part of it at the time. So my input on that subject is going to be very, very limited. I know that we tried, or people tried, to create some kind of fellowship.
And Jewish fellowship?
Jewish fellowship, and I remember I told you that story. The first meeting was at Hillel, and the people who came were highly, highly, highly assimilated. And shall I tell the story about Rabbi Elephants? I met Rabbi Elephant in that little kitchenette, and I said to him, "God, this is outright antiseptic." And he says, "Oh no, it's outright anti-Semitic." So that was the beginning of the attempt of creating a Jewish fellowship. The only name who was present at the time that I remember was Walter Simon, who used to be a professor in the history department. He's since passed away. So nothing very much came of it. And gradually, more Jewish people came to Boulder. And there was the building, of course, of the beautiful Har Hashem synagogue that I think Stan Goldberg was the architect for. And again, I do not remember participating. We must be charter members because we're on their list of charter members, but I remember very little about that.
But you said that Rabbi Milton Elephant, he had his wife Honey and four.
That was Hillel.
That was Hillel.
Yeah,
where the first fellowship was developing.
He didn't get very far. Mm-hmm. Rabbi Elephant was a fun guy. His wife Honey was even more appropriate for the setting. She was very involved with the students. She was very giving. She was, like you say, a good Jewish mother feeding everybody. But they did not get very far. And I think he was too orthodox for the Hillel crowd. And he did not stay very long, maybe 4 or 5 years. And I do not remember who took over at Hillel. I feel very dry in terms of information, so do you have some questions that might elicit some useful?
Well, you said that you were founding members of Har Hashem, and then what happened? What was your experience at Har Hashem?
I don't remember ever going. I do not remember ever going. I do not remember who the first rabbi was. Then when Rabbi Rose came,
the first Rabbi Rose.
Oh, of course. Sorry. Things kind of tightened up. He was incredibly Germanic, very authoritarian, very set in his ways. And my kids were growing up at the time, and I had a vague feeling of, golly, I wished I can give them some kind of identification. It wasn't in me. It wasn't in me to a very large extent, because my own experience of being Jewish in Nazi Germany was nothing but negative, and so I tried to keep away from it. I tried to keep my kids away from it. That was a huge mistake. That was one of the biggest mistakes I made, not to give them some kind of identification. And by the time wonderful, wonderful Rabbi Bronstein came along, it was too late. They had left. They had more or less found their own lives, and by that time it was too late. But it was Rabbi Bronstein who really made a very, very cohesive community out of many different factions, I would imagine. So, as I said, my contribution to early Jewish life in Boulder is woefully, woefully limited, and I do apologize.
Nothing to apologize for at all. That was your experience and the experience of many people. But you did tell me a story about a cross burning at Hillel.
That wasn't I. When I was desperately trying to remember Rabbi Elephant's first name, which happened to be Milton, I called Marion Safran.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know her? Do you know Safran?
Marion and Bill Safran.
And it was she who said that she got a lot of information out of the 1961 Hillel yearbook, and that apparently the cross burning was mentioned in that yearbook. So it was absolutely hearsay. I don't remember anything. I don't remember that. It may even have happened. We came in '59. It may have happened before then.
You also talked a little bit about Reuben Zubra.
Oh my God! Did you know Reuben? Okay. Reuben Zubra was a heavy-set, jovial guy. Wonderful. He was one of the master teachers at the university. He also, I believe, helped Dick Lamb, Dick Lamb, the governor, set up some very, very equitable tax measures. He was very politically involved in that way. He and Annie lived right up there at the top of King Street, and do any of you remember Tim Worth?
Mm-hmm, sure.
Okay. We created a wonderful political party to start Tim Worth going in. That was at Reuben's house, and he was just a very, very solid, warm, articulate, very sure in his opinions. He was just a great man, and I was telling Catherine he had many, many, many students over the years here in Boulder. Because his classes were huge, master classes. And he was a very reckless driver, and he would get stopped many, many a time. And the young policeman turned out to have been one of his students, so it invariably was, "Oh my God, Professor Zubra, I'm so sorry, go right ahead." With the result that he kept on barreling along.
You also said he was very Jewishly committed. He went to shul in Denver.
Yeah, he was very Jewishly committed, but he went to, I forgot, it was a very famous rabbi in Denver, and I forgot his name right now, I'm sorry. But all of the services with this family, it all happened in Denver. I do not believe that he ever committed to any of the burgeoning synagogues that were happening here. I do remember that when his wife Annie died, and Annie was a math teacher in the high schools, I think, also very warm, very giving. It was a great family with a great family life. When Annie died, Reuben had her buried in the backyard, and he asked the rabbi with whom they had been, in contact all these years, to give the services. And he told me that he got a call from the first Rabbi Rose, who was absolutely livid. "How can you do that to me?" I mean, it was the most natural thing in the world for Reuben to have the rabbi who had known them all their lives to give the services. So that's another connection to Har Hashem indirectly. What else about Reuben and Annie? Tennis players, and he was the loudest tennis player on the court. He would swear and he would sing and he would dance. He was great on the court. Great, both of them great tennis players. But golly, that was a long, long time ago, 25 years ago.
You weren't teaching at CU, but through Frank, what was your impression of Jewish life on campus?
Zilch.
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 Mm-hmm. And how has that changed over the years?
I don't know. I've been away. I was teaching.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I was for a little while there, and as a teaching assistant in the French department. But again, it was zilch, except for one young woman. Does the name Laura Sister mean anything to you?
Not
to you? Laura Sister, for a very long time, was the director of the mental health center, and she did a marvelous job. She died very, very young of cancer. Well, Laura was one of my students, but her Jewishness was, quietly accepted, but made nothing of. Mm-hmm. So I had. This is getting too involved. I had one other Jewish student. Did I tell you the story about Ron Eisenberg?
I think so. Go ahead.
It's a joke. Are you?
Go ahead.
Is there time for a funny story? Okay. Ron Eisenberg this was when I was teaching French literature in English translation. It was Wally Weir who had given me that honors course, and that was a lot of fun. Ron Eisenberg was the son of a apparently very well-known physicist. He was bright. He was absolutely undisciplined. He was absolutely on drugs. He came and didn't come, and he put me in a very bad position because he once asked me for a reference for him to go to law school, and I was really in a pickle. I don't remember how I handled that, but years and years after that, he called me on the phone after the class was finished, and he started telling me what he thought were enormous problems. And I said to him, Ron, all that sounds like Zeidnitz. He said, what's that? So I said, well, let's start at the beginning. Do you know the expression, Zeidnitz? Okay, problems that are not really problems. You should be lucky to have those problems, okay? So I said, well, Ron, do you know what Soros means? All of this over the telephone. And he said, oh, yes, it means good luck. And I said, what makes you think that? And he said, oh, my parents used to use that word when they talked about me. That was the only two Jewish students I ever came across. Mm-hmm. I suppose Frank told you about a couple of people in his department who, when he came to ask for money for a Jewish cause, literally kicked him out. To summarize, many, many years ago, Jewish life on campus, as far as I'm concerned, was zilch. I don't know how many people were at Hillel when Rabbi Elephant was there, maybe 50, maybe 35. But I quit school, I quit being on campus a good 20 years ago. And it's funny, once you're off campus, you're off campus. The calendar becomes, what do we have, a Gregorian calendar? Mm-hmm. We have, the calendar becomes the regular Gregorian calendar and no longer the academic calendar. So, again, I'm sorry, I have no information about what's happening on campus right now.
And how do you feel the Jewish community has changed from 1959 to 2013?
It has grown enormously, absolutely enormously. And we know relatively few people, and I'm delighted to see it grow that much, but being a product of Nazi Germany, too much exposure and too much success maybe always has a double-edged sword.
Makes you nervous.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to Nazi Germany. Tell us about your childhood, and I know you came through Cuba to the United States. Tell us a little bit about that story.
My father had a small store, and we were reasonably well off, and we lived in one part of the city. It was Altena. It was a suburb of Hamburg. We lived in one part of the city. The rest of the Jewish community lived quite far away, and the school was the Jewish school was in the middle. So I had a long walk to go to school, and a long walk back, again, isolated really from the rest of the Jewish kids. My parents went to synagogue 3 times a year. We had a very well-known rabbi in Altena. His name is Rabbi Carlebach, and he called us the 3-day Jews because we only came to shul those 3 days. Things were getting pretty frightening, and we left for Belgium in 1938, and then in 1940 Hitler caught up with us, and in 1941 we escaped illegally from Belgium to unoccupied France, then managed to get through Spain and Portugal and get on a ship to Cuba, and we were very lucky because the war had started. This was 1941, but we made it safely to Cuba. I had a no, never mind. I thought I had another story about Reuben, but it disappeared.
That's okay. So before we leave, you mentioned Rabbi Carlebach, who was your
rabbi.
That's
the story. That's the story about Reuben Zuber, okay? Reuben adored the singing rabbi.
Shlomo Carlebach.
Okay.
And the son of your rabbi.
No. The Carlebach family was must have been spread all over the world, family of rabbis. No, I have no idea what the relationship.
The same family.
Oh yeah. So Reuben was very enamored of this Shlomo Carlebach, and he tried to get his son Amos, who is not. I don't think any of his kids are very Jewishly oriented. Amos certainly is not. But Reuben said, "You must come and hear this rabbi." And by that time, Shlomo Carlebach was very old, and he barely dragged himself on the stage. Never mind the singing. And Amos was absolutely said, "Why did you drag me here? Why did you drag me here?" And poor Reuben was very disappointed. And that was one story. If you're interested in Reuben's kids,
Amos lives in Denver, you said.
No. Amos is okay. You want to hear about his children? Okay. There was Ezra. Louise, Suki, and Amos. Ezra is a high-powered anthropologist at one of the universities, the New York State universities. He may be in Buffalo. I'm not sure. Louise was a professor of law at I think Georgetown University in Washington. Suki is married to, became a physician, and working in Denver. I think she's retired right now. Married a son of an economist, Barkin, I think. And there was good old Amos. did Icelandic folklore, the study of Icelandic folklore as a subject. He didn't get very far. He hated it. So he did not get his PhD. He was the black son of the family. They were very, very intent on academic success, Annie and Boobin were. But when Annie got very sick, I told you that, I think, when Annie got very sick, it was the black sheep, Amos, who carried the brunt of helping them out. He is a blacksmith, makes very fancy wrought iron. Okay, very fancy wrought iron. He makes skates. He makes. He does all kinds of repair. So he has a workshop way out on North Boulder, a little workshop. Very, very laid back guy. Very nice, but nevertheless, they thought of him as not being successful, which is sad. Mm-hmm. The older I get, the more I feel that never mind this academia, but a good, solid profession is very important. And my feeling is that if professions were looked upon more highly rather than only the academic stuff, we'd all be better off. Mm-hmm. But that's a side comment.
So you were saying, just to pick up the thread, that you felt like your experience as a child, the discomfort around being Jewish has carried
absolutely
through
absolutely
your
yes.
adult life
yes.
here. And
total withdrawing. Yes. Sadly, yes.
Mm-hmm. And today it's still, you still feel that as we become more visible.
Oh yeah. To me, psychologically, exposure of any kind is not something I can deal with very well, and I think it may have something to do with.
Mm-hmm. And yet you're engaged intellectually in the Jewish community. I know you enjoy going to programs and...
Yeah, but that's very passive. That's mm-hmm. not that. I wished I could be more active. Yes, I very much wished, but it's a tiny bit of wonderful connection without the pain. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. Whereas holidays, we did have a lovely dinner every Friday night, and my mother would cry. She would cry because her own life had been very, very difficult. And you've got this infinite regress into historical things. And you can't, this idea of infinite regress, one generation creating the next with all of its complexes and all of its difficulties is a very real thing. So yes, unfortunately, committing, I can't.
Mm-hmm. But we like seeing you at the JCC.
Oh, I'm coming happily. Thank you. I'm coming happily.
I think it's nice that people who have an intellectual or cultural identification with being Jewish can...
Oh, that is very strong. That is very strong. Mm-hmm. Well, Isaac Bashevis Singer is one of my all-time favorites, although I am rereading one of his books, and it's not as good the second time around as it was 20 years ago. Did you know Phyllis Canavan? No. Did you know Phyllis Canavan? Phyllis Canavan was a professor in the philosophy department, and she once gave a very interesting course on certain philosophers and comparable counterparts in literature. So she would, I don't have an example anymore. It's been a long time ago, and I remember. Well, I was only to mention that
You wrote a paper about Singer.
the paper about Singer, where I felt that maybe to him the idea of the goblins and the werewolves and the warlocks and all of this mystical word was possibly a principle of evil, and she liked it. But funny that neither one of you knew Phyllis, because she was she was also thought of as a master teacher. This was in philosophy. She worked under Wally Weir, I think. Do you know Wally Weir mean anything? I am so old, my references do not apply to you. Okay.
Wally, no, don't know.
Okay.
Well, certainly, you know, you've known a lot of the Jewish figures and the big figures at CU who weren't Jewish, and so you've really been a part of Boulder history here, whether you were an organizer or a joiner or not. You know, certainly had a lot of connections.
Yeah, but you know, now that you are here, and now that I'd like to tell you about things, I realized to what extent my life was hermetic, almost very, very isolated. And I'm sorry about that, because I wish I could give you more information.
Well, you've given us great information, and I think your story is a story that's not at all uncommon, of people, the push-pull of being Jewish. Right?
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Push-pull.
yeah, it is.
And so it's great to
But
have that story.
but can I make one more
please.
statement? That I do believe that my time in history was a particularly lucky one, because I do believe that the creation of the State of Israel has given all of American Jewry the wherewithal, the psychological ability to be what they are. And I feel that very, very strongly, and I also feel that we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to Israel for having made our life here in America as pleasant. And this doesn't mean that there may be some political things happening which are not over there, which are not very good, but psychologically, basically, I feel very strongly that we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to. Without the state being there, we Jews here in America, I don't think could have lived the life that. Did you ever agree? Or?
I totally agree.
Okay.
I totally agree.
Yeah, thanks. Because many people don't even think in those terms.
And I think we think of it as something that the older generation thinks, but I think that for the younger generation, there's a very, very strong imperative there to understand how it has given the Jewish people strength and confidence, and is really, it's very important to me. So I'm glad to hear it's important to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that's a pillar of Jewish life, and I'm glad you shared that thought, and I want to thank you for being interviewed and for all that you've participated in. So
thank you very much. Thank you, both of you.